It was a meeting where we had wide-ranging discussions on a number of issues, but we focused largely on the economy and how our partnership between South Africa and the United Kingdom can be deepened around economic matters, the economic growth that we are trying to drive. I briefed the Prime Minister about our investment drive to raise quite a bit of money for investment in South Africa, $100 billion over the next 5 years. And she was quite enthusiastic about that, and they, as the UK, would like to find a way, or 2 ways, or 3 ways in which they can also play a role in assisting South Africa on this investment drive.
Well, before leaving for London last night, President Ramaphosa, of course, announced that plan to host a major investment conference by the end of September in a bid to attract some 1.2 trillion rand in investment over the next 5 years. This morning, as you saw there, he jetted into the UK with his high-powered delegation to that Commonwealth Heads of Government Summit, during which he hopes to promote South Africa as an investment destination. For more on this story now, we cross to our correspondent, Catherine Drew, in London. Catherine, good evening to you. First up, for the President for a courtesy visit with the Queen.
Yes, that's right. Seeing the visuals of that, obviously something of a first for the South African leader to visit the Queen. This was in her Windsor Castle. She's not currently at Buckingham Palace. And we've also seen the footage how he was presented with 2 letters from Nelson Mandela to the Queen. And she spoke at some length, apparently, about how she treasured her friendship with the former South African leader. So I believe she has gifted those letters to the South African president. That's what he mentioned later when we caught up with him at Downing Street. And again, for those discussions with Theresa May, and as you mentioned, him saying there that he felt South Africa had a very solid relationship with the UK, but that he wanted to improve on those ties.
This will, of course, be his first interaction as head of state with the leaders of the Commonwealth Heads of State. How significant is the 53-nation grouping?
Well, that is a key question, which I think the Commonwealth is really trying to address this week, saying that it is relevant. And actually, after his meetings with Theresa May, the President was asked, is the Commonwealth still relevant? And he said, yes, it was a very strong family. Now, some people who criticise the Commonwealth and think really that these colonial ties, are worth nothing today, they want to push back on that. And the key question, I think, is, where will South Africa go now? When I spoke to Commonwealth leaders earlier in the year, they said that South Africa hadn't really been engaged in the organisation under President Zuma. So they are looking to South Africa's current president for leadership and for a way to compete with other nations.
Of course, he said that he's going to use the summit to really showcase South Africa as an investment destination. Have there been any concerns around some of the policies under consideration? We know, of course, there was even a fake news poster that purportedly said that Theresa May was concerned about land reform programs in South Africa that are being considered at the moment.
Yes, indeed. Well, when I spoke to the President when he came out of talks with Theresa May, I did say, obviously, all these heads of state are in town. Many of those nations, including the African nations, will be looking for investment. What makes South Africa's case? What makes South Africa special? And he said, I'm glad you asked me that. We've got a good story to tell. We are a democracy. We adhere to the rule of law. We have a free press. South Africa has everything going for it. But, of course, that will be a tough sell. We have all these heads of states, and obviously South Africa will not be alone in looking for investment. As you mentioned, there has been fake news about Theresa May. I can tell you, Number 10 telling me that at no point has she made any comment about that policy. It would not be for a leader of another country to make a comment. She certainly has not done. And in the article you mentioned, I noted that she was wearing a jacket that she'd been wearing that day, not when she was supposed supposed to have made those comments. So that was a fake news piece. Obviously, international investors will be looking to see in which direction South Africa is going, but obviously very adherent to the fact that South Africa is going through a change, and they'll be looking to see what the new president has to say.
He's also, of course, going to be lobbying for support for South Africa's candidature to the UN Security Council for 2019-2020. How might that go down?
Well, that's difficult to say. Hopefully we'll catch up with the president over the course of the next few days to see if he's got a sense of how much support there is. Obviously, there has been a long-running argument that a country from Africa should have a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. This is not for the creation of a permanent post, but it would be part of the rotating UN Security Council. We know that South Africa has held that seat before. Obviously, it comes at a time of very tense international relations between the US and Russia, actions in Syria between the UK and Russia. So I would imagine that the British would perhaps welcome South Africa's seat on the UN Security Council, and perhaps they this week are indeed mindful that if South Africa wins, that it would be good to have, you know, a close relationship with South Africa. So we'll have to see how that lobbying goes this week.
Indeed, Catherine, we will have to wait and see. That's our Catherine Drew there on the line from the UK.